Welcome to the Old Man Orange Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Ryan Dunnigan.
And we're coming at you with the brand new live action Cowboy Bebop TV show on Netflix, which was kind of an interesting romp. That's the way I would kind of say it.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things for people this is your first time tuning in. Cowboy Bebop is both one of our favorite shows. And when we first heard this, I mean, you know, a lot of the internet was like, oh my God, it's going to be the worst thing ever. I'm like, I don't think it's going to be the worst thing ever, but we'll find out when it happens, whatever it is. And before we go into spoilers or when this happens, that happens, let me just say off the bat, like, I liked it. I wasn't blown away. I didn't love it, but I liked it, you know, and I think people are being a little too harsh on it. There are definitely things in there, they're like, why'd you do that? But there are other things like, oh, that was pretty good, you know?
Yeah, it has some weird choices here and there and so on. But yeah, overall it was enjoyable. I will say it kind of peters out. Like, I felt like it started off really good. Like, as well as when we talked yesterday, I was only up to episode 5. I'm like, dude, it's pretty good. And then I kind of realized, I'm like, then like the next 5 episodes, it's like, okay, not a whole lot happens. This is definitely the filler section of, we're just waiting to get to the end here, you know, But yeah, no, it's one of those ones. I mean, I know people are just at this point now where they just want to hate everything. It seems like anything that comes out, like, it's like, God forbid, it's the worst thing ever. I mean, you can see with the Grand Theft Auto remasters that come out, people are like, I want my money back. It's like they're worse than the original versions. I'm like, well, you know, I have the original versions and I have these remastered ones, and I went through all the remastered ones, and they're, you know, I mean, yeah, could they be better? Probably, but, you know, they're not bad. This worked for me. I made it through Grand Theft Auto 3 and Vice City, you know, it's like, what's the problem? But I feel like that's kind of the same thing that Cowboy Bebop started getting too. It's just people just want to hate almost because you don't have actual problems like war, you know, and famine and all that kind of stuff. So they just gotta hate all the free shit they get practically.
The war economy from Metal Gear Solid 4.
Yeah. That's pretty much what Metal Gear Solid 4, they're just like, you know what, here's the thing. If people don't have war, they're just going to start bitching about every movie, every video game, every book that comes out, you know. If they got war, they got a reason why, you know, it's great to be alive. Why it's great to, you know, go on another day.
That's the scene when like Big Boss and like Solid Snake are in the graveyard walking back and forth.
He's like, you're not gonna believe it. He's like, you know, pretty soon in the future they're gonna make this Cowboy Bebop live. They're gonna make a fucking Cowboy Bebop live action. Yeah, I know. I thought it was pretty weird too, but people are gonna bitch the fuck out of it because you know why? We don't got war anymore. You know, they're gonna give up on Iraq, and then next thing you know, people are just gonna be as pissed as all can be.
He's saying this while he's like leaning against the boss's gravestone, dying because of the fox die.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, wow, he really called it. He, like, you know, years. Well, actually, you know, fucking Snake probably only had like 5 years max by that point. So who knows? But yeah, the whole thing with that show. It's funny you say that because a lot of people thought it started off slow and then they liked it more as it went along. Where I found myself kind of like, I felt pretty consistent about it the whole way. But I kind of figured, like, I don't want to sound like, I'm not trying to be like, oh, I knew this was going to happen because of this. But the second, you know, you start, I just kind of like, I was just curious. I went on IMDb before they even released a trailer, before they even released stills. And I just looked up the cast. And I just wanted to see, like, what other characters were in the show. And I saw, like, oh, this character's in the show for this many episodes, this character's in the show for that many episodes. So I figured it was going to be one of those things where there is a constant narrative through line as opposed to with the show. Yeah, where like Vicious is only in like I think 4 or 5 episodes of the original 26 episode series. And he's in nearly, I think, every episode of this, whether it be for a majority of it or just a quick part. Well, so I was like, okay, this is going to be something kind of running through, and they're probably going to be visiting a couple of the same locations because they made these sets like, look, we're not getting rid of the set. Obviously, the Bebop is going to be there every episode, but there's other sets that, like, okay, you made this bar, we got to make use of this bar.
Well, then I think that's kind of the thing is that it has the almost the standard television problem that no matter what, it's like you're going to be like, it's almost too long, so it's almost like, okay, we got to do some filler stuff. Let's just hang around this, place for a good long while more than we have to, and so on. And I think that's just kind of where it was, like, because I felt like when the first like 4 episodes, I'm like, man, it's actually got pretty good pace for a TV show. It's got action in every single episode and so on. And then I think it was by about episode 5. I mean, I like, of course, the scenes with Jet when he's going back with his old like police buddy and so on like that, because that stuff I always thought was really cool. But then the other like half of the show is like the most fillery stuff ever. It's just like literally like let's find Faye and Spike and just find a way so they don't leave the ship and don't go out and do anything cool and don't have any action. They're just gonna kind of keep talking and fighting over who they're gonna get for their next bounty, but they're never actually gonna go after an actual bounty. And I thought it was just like, okay, come on. Like it has that thing where it's like I almost think the show would be better off as just a 25-minute long show or something like that instead of being like a 40 minutes each time or whatever they run.
Yeah, I think this would be better off as a 25 or 30-minute episode, but at the same time, that didn't bother me because usually they are out in the field and they are off doing a bunch of different things. But that one in particular, I didn't mind just because we got to see them bounce off each other, and it still felt like Faye and Spike in the way they bicker, but I guess in like just a different conversation we never saw in the live action show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was one of those things like, and how they just kept on procrastinating, and then like Faye's like, wait, you don't think I'm actually a good bounty hunter? You think I'm gonna mess it up? So you just keep on finding excuses to keep me in here. Like, yeah, you pretty much called it, So, I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, that was an easy day to shoot, but at the same
that's
time,
what I mean. Is I felt like it was just a lot of. I'm not saying that like it's all bad, but it is just like it felt like okay, we're just dragging this out so we can hit that 40-minute mark again.
But at the same time, though, I didn't think that it wasn't entertaining. The whole time, there was like maybe some scenes that I think went on for too long, and which I can't really name one off the top of my head. But there's also just some weird choices. But some of those choices I think are just out of the context of like, well, this would work better in animation, so we got to find excuses to present it this way. And since we got to kind of make longevity out of, because in all honesty, one of the big changes, and I haven't really looked at a lot of reviews. I've just kind of seen like thumbnails of like negative reviews, and I'm just like, well, you already. First off, before I even watch the show, I know Ed's gonna be in it because it's in your thumbnail. Fuck you.
Yeah.
And then
some people just using that clickbait material.
Some people just fucking suck. Anyway, fuck Clownfish TV. Fuck the quartering. Anyway, so those are the thumbnails I saw. Anyway, what was I gonna say? Yeah. So looking at that, I was kind of like, all right, well, I could just see there's a lot of negative reviews on this, but let me just go in and see. And then watching it, there is that thing, like, for instance, like, Vicious. If Vicious was just kind of scowling and, like, only saying 5 words every few episodes, then in live action and using them all the time like that would have been probably a bit much. So I get kind of why they made him a little bit more of, like, he's somewhat self-conscious. He can kill anybody in the room, but at the same time, he's afraid someone else is gonna like. He constantly has this thing like he's trying to prove like, Daddy, I can do it.
Well, they give him a very like British. It's kind of weird because Vicious is almost kind of like. The guy who plays him is not bad, but he's odd. It's like it's like also I think it's weird when you get like someone like who has like really dark hair and then it's like here, let's just get him with like white hair, which just makes him look like he's got a funny wig on the whole time. Like it's like couldn't you have just got somebody who's closer to blonde so it didn't look so like uncanny, unnatural? But yeah. So he looks kind of funny the whole time you're looking at him. Like he almost just, you know what I mean? Like it's either that or I felt like Vicious should have been Japanese. Like it's one of those ones because a Japanese guy I think could pull off having like the pure like white hair and it would almost look more natural. But they do give him that kind of like British aristocrat, like things are just never the way I want them to be. I just always want to be the best, but somebody always gets in my way, and I have to kill them. And a little bit more whiny and mopier and so on. And I mean, once again, I guess it's because they're filling him in there. Because once again, Vicious, if you watch the show, I mean, like especially if you're watching the show on TV back in the day, you might have never even seen an episode that had Vicious in it. That's how like limited he is in it.
And the whole thing with him is when he's on screen, you know it. And he barely, like, there's something about him that he's constantly just, like, brooding and just, like, I'd like to get him on this show eventually, but I was on Dragon Ball and Chain like a few months back, and I was talking to Chris on that show, and we were talking about Bebop, and it's usually a Dragon Ball focused show, but they did a Bebop one, and they wanted me on. That right there, he said, like, here's the thing about Vicious. He's not much of a character because he's more of like a force. He's more of like, he has great screen presence, but he doesn't really have a lot of character. I'm like, I see what you mean, but at the same time, I feel like sometimes that's something to the effect, like, for the type of story they're trying to tell, I think that works for the original. For this, that could like kind of wear thin a little quicker, but at the same time, in that case, maybe you shouldn't probably use him every episode.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because I'll say this, I think what makes Vicious work better in the original one is he comes across as a lot more mysterious. This one, you're getting a little too much. It's the same thing with Julia. It's almost like they're really utilizing Julia like a lot, but it almost like, I don't know, it's like, especially even when you get towards the end, then, she just becomes like this ultimate villain and so on. It's like, maybe she should have been a little bit more mysterious too instead of being used throughout this whole thing.
I mean, I get why they did it. At the same time, though, it's just one of those things of like, it wasn't that I wasn't entertained. It's just, I prefer the original. But at the same time, like, I'll say this. There are conversations when they have the flashback episode with Spike and Vicious and a lot of that gets filled in. And a lot of times people hate that, but in this particular one, it didn't bother me because, well, this is this version of it. This isn't. Yeah. If they just said this is the new version, then I'd be like, what the fuck? But since this is this version, I'm fine with it. And I thought a lot of the back and forth when I saw the episode where Spike and Vicious are actually being casual and kind of bullshitting with each other. I liked that. I thought then that was the episode that kind of endeared me a little more to him. And then that's kind of. It's kind of weird how I give a show credit if you can make me go have my arms crossed majority of the time over a particular thing, and then when you get to this one particular episode that kind of helps flesh it out, I'm like, oh, okay,
Oh yeah. No, I think that's fine. And that's what I mean. I'm looking at when I'm looking at this show, I'm not looking at the. I mean, you can't help but kind of compare it to the original series, but it's one of those ones where I'm still taking it like kind of like, hey, this is just an adaptation. It's going to be a little bit different. I mean, really, it's like it gives kind of like that very like almost. Fireflies, how that's like the way I feel they kind of went across. And now Firefly always feels like that's almost like very Bebop oriented, and you could almost even feel like Firefly is almost like Bebop inspired, but like those things almost came out like the same time, so it's like I almost feel they might not have had any like knowledge of each other.
Well, it's also the thing with that is because you mentioned Firefly, and I actually wanted to say this because when you watch Firefly, there was things I still like the show, but there are things when you watch it back again.
It's hokey.
It's very hokey. It's very cheap. And the thing about, you get it. They said, well, let's make this look a little bit more Western-y. Let's go to some old Western town. Like,
we're literally going to go to an old Western town. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I like Firefly as well too, but it is very hokey, And they use that too because, like, look, it's a limited budget, so since people are settling, they can only make so much, so it is going to be kind of like a frontier town. Like, that's a cool concept. I still don't think it'll be full on log cabins and bonnets. Yeah.
The thing with this is it doesn't do that exactly, but some sets and locations look great. Others look like they're filming like behind the Best Buy or something,
Yeah. Well, I'll say this show has a hokey feel to it too, and I'm not saying that like is necessary. That's not a bad thing. That kind of gives it kind of a fun feel in a sense. But it does have some. It'll have some certain. It's weird. It's like the pure CG like space scenes look fantastic, but then sometimes you get to some of the real sets, and that's where it looks maybe a little bit goofy because they do that thing where it almost kind of reminds you like the same way that Gotham was, where it's like, okay, we're in the future. I mean, Gotham's not technically in the future, but you know what I mean. But it has all like this old-fashioned technology for some weird reason, which I'll say this, I think in Bebop, it didn't really mean to have that. It's just like in 1998, the stuff that they had was actually looking pretty futuristic and so on, but now they're almost doing the thing where it's like, oh, just slap some Apple computers, like some 1985 Apple computers around, and that's how they're running the spaceship here, and put, a Sinclair over here, and that's what they're typing on. It's just, I don't know, I feel like that stuff, I mean, it's interesting, but it's kind of a little bit like, okay, I mean, like that's always a little odd when it's like, really old-fashioned tech that's running really like modern stuff.
Well, the thing about Bebop is that they only mention the Astral Gate and the explosion. They don't really go into detail with it. And the whole thing with Bebop is okay, there was a big accident. People had to leave Earth in a rush and try to get over and make colonies and go and terraform other planets because Earth was fucked. So they just took what they had, and a lot of things. I mean, there's some planets like Mars is kind of like, you know, your New York City or whatever, because that's the one that's probably, Mars is one of the first ones that was colonized, so Mars is the most far ahead. But there's other colonies and other terraformed planets that aren't as far ahead, so those have shit that was left over and they're constantly reusing things. Yeah. So without that context, you don't really have... It's just kind of like, why is he okay? He's running a crime syndicate, but he has an old-fashioned like typewriter in his room. You know what I mean? So there's some things kind of like that, you know.
As I said, it reminds me the same way that like Gotham kind of was, like that show. And I mean, all in all, that's actually a pretty solid show. But like, it did have that weird thing, like they're using typewriters, but they also have cell phones. Like, yeah. I just like, okay, like, you know what I mean? Like, it is kind of a little bit kind of bizarre. But I mean, I guess that once again, if you take the anime, like in 1998, like, you know, you could still make just a regular square box like PC look pretty futuristic and so on. You just give it a couple extra effects and whatnot. But it does kind of have that, and I felt like, because, you know, in a sense, this show's sort of meant for like people that, in a sense, people that watch the anime, but also people that never have seen the anime, and they're trying to get brand new people involved. And those people might be slightly confused on why the hell does this look like this?
Well, my thing is, it's kind of like, because that was even another thing with Bebop, because I remember reading it right around the time when the movie was coming out, the animated movie. I remember reading a interview with a bunch of people that were involved in making it. I want to say the director or maybe the concept artist, one of them, was saying something to the effect of like, I want it to look like it could be today, but at the same time, it could also be like somewhere in the future, you know, like you'd be walking down the street and it looks like you're somewhere in, you know, like the slums of Italy. Then you go around the corner and there's a machine that's terraforming the planet, and like some kind of machine you don't even know what it is, but the thing's been used a lot and been worn down, and then a kid goes by on a bicycle that doesn't even like work all that well. So like it wasn't that verbatim, but it was something to that effect. Yeah. So, and I think the show does a really good job of portraying that, but the original show as well as the animated movie, this does not do as good of a job, just because I think they're just more limited on budget. I think Netflix is being a little stingy with the budget, and some things look great, other things look kind of like what you're saying, kind of like, well, like I guess the Gotham / Firefly mentality, you know? Yeah, exactly. Just like, okay, we're gonna kind of, you know, sort of use what we have and kind of mix match these things together and whatnot. I'm not saying it necessarily looks bad. It's kind of cool in a way. It's just kind of a little bit funny, but, you know, not a bad thing necessarily. It's more like it's kind of like, maybe this isn't practical, but this image right here invokes noir or invokes Western. So we're going to go with that because that's the feeling it's invoking, even though they probably wouldn't be using that. But like, it's kind of like, just to give an example, like, of what I mean, because there's a scene, like one of the last shots, when Spike is walking down the alley and you see that city in the distance. That city looks good, and that looks like it takes place in Cowboy Bebop. And then there's another area, like so many moments where we just got to meet up at this place or that place, and it looks kind of like they're just at like a area, like a storage unit warehouse or something, and that's literally what it was a storage unit. Maybe that's not the best example, but it looks like there's things like that though throughout the show, and then they just plop like a little sci-fi food truck and then like some fancy like sci-fi looking lights, and we call it good, you know? Yeah, exactly. Kind of has that sort of feel to it and so on. But I mean, that's generally just a TV issue in general. But yeah, no, it's still kind of neat. I mean, another thing I think that's a little bit interesting that they kind of go with is they give this thing a rated R, but it's almost like a weird one, because it's like this thing should be almost like PG-13, because the only thing that really makes it rated R for the most part is just the language, and the language almost feels kind of out of place sometimes. I felt like, the violence, it's more violent. It's not that violent though. That's the thing is it only has like, they have like a couple moments, but like most of the time it cuts away and it's just little blood spurts and things like that. Like, I feel like this thing almost could have been pulled back to a PG-13, and I mean, like, it's one of those ones, like, I mean, I know, like, the Cowboy Bebop, the movie's rated R, but let's be honest, that's pretty much PG-13. I feel like that just gets rated R because that's just that one time period where they're like, the show seems a little bit too intense for since it's animated, so just slap a rated R on it. We're just not too sure about it, you know? I feel like that's why that gets that. But Can I just say something about that? I feel like that movie wasn't even finished by the Motion Picture Association of America, just because it just says some violent images. That's all it says on there. It doesn't say anything about the language in the movie. It doesn't say anything about like the sexuality and like, you know, tits, like face tits hanging out for a second. Or,
well, they don't like hang. It's just like cleavage.
Yeah, but you know, just kind of like a lot of the there's a lot of sexuality in the movie too.
Yeah.
So I mean, she's literally bound up, and he brings a blade up, cuts her shirt open. Her tits aren't hanging out, but they're, you know.
Yeah.
Still, you know, and then like, I'm pretty sure they didn't even finish that movie. They're like, it's probably an hour. Call it good. We don't have time for this shit.
I just felt like it's one of those ones. Somebody was scared that they were watching anime. They just didn't want to be caught watching animation. I felt so they just like gave it that, because that thing's pretty much like a PG-13. I mean, it's really the only difference between that and like the TV show mostly is just it has a couple things that you probably couldn't do on a TV-14 television, but you could do in a PG-13 movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, like the violence, I'm gonna say there's a few violent scenes that really stand out. There's like the part where there's the I forget the character's name, but there's the environmentalist lady. Instead of turning people into monkeys, she turns them into trees. Mm-hmm. And the scene where you see the lady get turned into a tree, that's like some straight up Evil Dead type shit. Mm-hmm. And then you have like scenes where like people get decapitated by Vicious, and then you have like, you know, so there's a few scenes kind of like that. But I mean, the violence isn't the worst violence I've ever seen, but I guess kind of knowing what Cowboy Bebop is, and they put in like these 5 scenes that probably push it a little more to R, and they stack up all the language.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing is I feel like the language feels kind of out of place. It almost reminds me of like when you start watching those later day Family Guy ones, and they start making the Family Guy stuff rated R, and you go, you know what? It seems kind of weird that Peter Griffin's saying fuck all the time, like.
I haven't seen any of those, really. He does?
Yeah, he does. It's like, I remember Cisco had some of those, like, when he got kind of into collecting all the Family Guy Blu-ray or DVDs and so on. He's like, by the later day ones, it's like they're all, like, rated R, because they're like, they do, like, the unrated thing when they come out. You know, and I don't know if they're just trying to compete with South Park, but it's like, you know, South Park, you expect that, but it'd almost be the same thing if Simpsons came out and just, like, started, like, we're going fucking full rated R of Simpsons. You'd be like, well...
What the fuck, Homer?
Yeah. I mean, for a novelty moment, it would be interesting, but, you know, in the long run, you'd be like, wait a second, this isn't exactly what this show is. And I feel like with Cowboy Bebop, it's almost like Phase the One, because they just make her, like, she comes out, like, she's swearing like a sailor the whole time. And I feel like it's almost like, I don't know, it feels like it's kind of, like, there just to be like, oh, yeah, like, almost like a 15-year-old coming, like, yeah, I want to see this, like, you know, this swearing left and right, like, you know, it's gonna be intense, man. Be like... Well, I don't know. It felt like the show didn't need it. Like, I don't know why you need so much in this. It sounds weird, but just, I don't know. Cowboy Bebop doesn't have that feel that, like, it needs all that swearing. I don't know. It just doesn't balance it, I don't think, but...
Newsflash, Old Man Orange does not like swearing.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I'm just saying, it's like...
No, I get you. I totally get what you mean.
There's certain things in life where, like, they work great as, like, a rated R, and the more rated R it is, the better. But I don't know why. I feel like Cowboy Bebop, you could have pulled this off as a very solid PG-13, and I felt like it almost just feels like it's rated R just to be rated R. Almost has that feeling of like back in the 2000s when they would make like the unrated version, and then they would just slap some extra CG blood, couple fucks in the background that you don't know how they really appear there. It's like, which character is really saying that? I don't know. It just sounds like it's just coming off, you know, just like through the echo.
Die Hard 4, you know, like all the fucks come off screen, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, I don't know. I just thought that was the only thing. Is like, it was like, oh, it felt kind of weird. Like, it was like, oh, you don't expect those characters to be kind of talking like that and so on. And some of them just felt like they were kind of very, like, shoehorned in there.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It's one of those things, like, it didn't bother me, per se, because I feel like they knew that, like, by this point, majority of the people that care or watch this thing are going to be probably in their 30s or older. Mm-hmm. At the same time, though, I didn't really need all the extra language or the extra violence, but it didn't bother me that it was there just because it was a different version. But it did seem kind of like it did feel a little bit of like, look how grown up we are, Dad.
Oh yeah, that's, I mean, it had that kind of, and I mean, I guess nowadays everything kind of has to be sort of rated R, because even kids don't probably watch shows. You know, there's a lot of people out there, if they see TV 14, they don't watch it, they just skip past it. So that might have been what they're kind of going with, you know, because if you think about it, all the major TV shows are generally rated R. You know, or damn near close to. I mean, shit, even Star Trek nowadays, you got Picard going, fuck! And it's just like, well, I mean, that's almost just kind of funny in itself, but...
He just got off the set of Logan, so he's like, I want to do that for myself now. Yeah. I didn't see it, but I'm just assuming.
But I just remember, it just, like, even that seemed kind of odd, you know what I mean? Like, you just don't expect, like, Star Trek's getting edgy now.
Well, it's also,
you know, it's like one of those ones. Like I'll even say, the start of like Star Trek Picard, it really didn't need to be rated R. I felt like they just wanted to be ballsy. That's the only reason why they threw some fucks in there.
They were just watching Logan. I mean, like,
yeah. See, and now Logan, like, it totally works on that one. I felt like that works really well like that. But you know, yeah, I felt like time and a place, and I don't know, in Cowboy Bebop, it felt a little bit weird, because even, like, Faye, she just kind of felt like she had, like, a 15-year-old writing for her. Like, almost like one of those ones, okay, Faye, when you come in, you're going to say, you fucking dick goblin vagina sucker. Like, you know, it's just like, what? Why is she saying, like, I just feel like one of those ones, like, who's writing this? I'm
That's
a full-grown adult. You know, I mean, literally, Faye's character does feel like she was put together by like a 15-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, okay, man, like somebody, she's gonna have like this lesbo scene in it. Why are you putting that in there? Faye's not a lesbian. Be like, come on, man. I'm like trying to be like modern / risque, because you know what's gonna do? There's a lot of people out there that are gonna be fucking turned off by this, and they're gonna be fucking pissed. But you know what? That's gonna create articles, man.
I that didn't bother me, but at the same time, I could see that also being kind of like trying to piss off all the people they knew would be complaining about this thing in the first place. It didn't bother me. I can
don't
honestly
feel like that's
see
gonna
Faye
piss off the
going,
people they'd be complaining about, but I felt like that's one of those ones where some people are gonna be like, I don't know. I'll say it does kind of, this is something that's kind of been like bothering me a little bit recently, is that like a lot of movies, when you have a strong female, they'll always make her lesbian. Always. Which I feel like if you were a girl and you were a strong female and you saw that every character in a movie that was supposed to be a strong female turned out to be a lesbian, it would make you kind of go, does that mean that I'm a lesbian? Like, what does that mean? Like, why can't we just have a strong female that doesn't have to be a lesbian? And so, you know what I mean? Like, it just feels like that's always such a go-to in like American stuff in about the last 5 years or so.
I don't know. I think it's a case-by-case basis. For this particular show, I didn't think really... I could see Faye going either way. I mean, here's the thing about Faye. She, other than, like, Whitney, which we'll get into Whitney in a little while, or after this maybe, we never really see her have any on-screen relationship with anybody. She just used it to get what she wanted, and then she got out of there.
That's what I mean. So, I don't feel like Faye. I feel like Faye's the femme fatale character, and a lot of times those characters, they have sexual appeal, but they don't actually. They're not like bogged down by it, because that's almost what they use as like almost like a skill and a strength, but not so much. I don't know. It felt like it sort of broke the character a little bit from like her original like almost like strengths and so on. I mean, it's one of those. I'm not saying it's like something that like is like it's not like it's like the worst thing or anything like that, but I just felt like it was an odd scene that one was very unnecessary. Like it was another one of those ones like you could have saved 20 minutes by not having that there, because it was just kind of bizarre. But like it does kind of like, I felt like it sort of like drops the character down a little bit from being as strong as she could have been, just because it's it's just
okay. The point I was going to make though is I think the thing with her is, we never really saw her in a relationship, and we don't really need to see her in a relationship. But out of that, I felt like for her, it could kind of go either way with her. Now that scene, I'm not really so much defending the scene, like thinking it really helped the story. I guess they wanted to just give her more agency in a sense to kind of talk about like, you know, like, so was that your like, so how long ago was it for you? Like, I don't know. And that's where we got more information on, you know, that she was frozen, and this is the first time she's been kind of coming out, and she's not really sure if she really likes guys or girls or that kind of thing. So that whole, like, I don't think that part was poorly written exactly, but I did think it was weird that lady was suddenly along with them on the ride. Like, where the fuck? Okay, you fucked once, and now you're just here, like, on the mission, you know?
Well, it's also the same thing, too, that I'll even say with the other lady, too. It's, once again, you have a lady who's a mechanic. Of course she's a fucking lesbian. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just have a lady mechanic anymore. It's like, they gotta be a fucking lesbian. I just always think that stuff, it's like, right when I saw that character, I'm like, she's gonna be a lesbian. I just could tell. Like, it's written by, you know, TV and Hollywood. It's got to be a, you know, lesbian. There's no way that you could have just a regular like mechanic lady. But I don't know. I just felt like that was just very unnecessary. I don't know. Maybe they just felt like because this will lead into like another part, but maybe it's that thing that they felt like all these characters needed to have relationships, but I really don't think these characters do. I think there's something to be said about characters who don't have relationships sometimes in movies, and it's just like, it's the same thing with Jet, because Jet now has like a kid with like some random ass white chick on like another planet, and you're like,
that is supposed to be, what's her name? That is the same name as the lady from the episode from the show. She just looks different.
Oh, is it?
Eliza, or that's the same
okay.
lady. Yeah.
But like, yeah, and it's like, I love it's just got I love the husband guy who's just like the old like cowboy Bronco Buster looking guy with the big old mustache and whatnot.
I think one of who they are, because they did do a little bit of, I think they changed some names and moved some stuff around, but I think that's meant to be Bob or Bill. I don't remember his name, but there's the guy there's the guy with the stash. He'd always get information from the ISP, from his old
the cops.
Not his partner, but his old buddy from still in the ISP. So I think that's who that is supposed to be right there. That guy.
Maybe that's what it is, and so on.
Because there's some characters they gender bend and swap around, like Mao, for instance. Like Mao Yenrai was like kind of a father figure to like Spike, but in this, she was Mao was suddenly a woman and just kind of like the lady that tried to help bring Vicious down but fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's not a big deal right there. I feel like that kind of works in a way that it gives it more of the motherly feel to it. But because it's like Jet never had a daughter in the show, did he?
No, but that didn't bother me. It's one of those things like I could see him. Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say the only thing I was like, when I saw that, I'm like, okay, they're just gonna utilize this as like a hostage at some point later down the line.
Yeah, I knew the same thing.
But it's like
they need something other than like my ex-girlfriend, to like take her. She's my ex-girlfriend. I don't give a shit, I knew that she was going to be a hostage at some point.
Yeah, but it's like one of those ones. I mean, once again, not saying it necessarily bothered me, but it felt like it was like one of those ones like, I don't know, that some of these choices, they almost give it more of like, oh, okay, you kind of like generic what was kind of almost more interesting, that like, hey, here's a bunch of these loner guys out in space. None of them have any real connection. I mean, Spike has connections from back in the day, but like in a sense, they're all just like very, very individualist people, Yeah. And now that you kind of throw in that, I don't know, it throws in that like, in a sense, the way that I look at Jet's more like about like, it's all about family, as in Spike and Faye. And then once you take away that family aspect, it's more like, no, it's about my daughter, Spike. I could care about. I'll turn you in 2 seconds.
Well, I'll say this: regardless of that plot point they wrote in, I did think Mustafa Shakir was like the perfect Jet. Like there's no point where I was questioning, is that Jet Black? That was Jet Black. No question.
Well, him and it's like, and John Cho, like both of those guys were like fantastic. Like I thought they were really there. I liked Faye, but she just had a couple things that I thought were just a little bit off. But I mean, that's not really the actress's fault. I think it's just some of like just her writing was a little bit bizarre. That's about it though.
Yeah, they would find like weird. I don't remember, but they would give her like weird like insults to give people. I can't remember them off the top of my head.
I don't remember them, but they were kind of almost a little too. As I said, they felt like they were written by like an angry 15-year-old. What I.
Yeah.
And it made her feel a little bit more stupid when she sort of said some of those lines, like almost like she was just, I don't know. Like it took away, because I felt like that was always the thing about Faye. She had that kind of very intelligent mystique, like, that's just that kind of character. But no, it's like realistically, I think all three of the actors were all totally fine. Like I actually liked all of them, and I had no problems there. Like they all sold it extremely well. And I mean, I know it just seems like it's kind of like nitpicking about little things and so on like that. But I mean, it's still was all in all pretty darn enjoyable. I mean, I'm gonna say this, there's one last little nitpick I sort of have, and that is they should have been smoking way more. I felt like there's not enough smoking in here. Faye is never smoking. I didn't think Jet was gonna smoke, but he smokes one cigarette finally at the end. And I don't know if that's just because nowadays smoking's treated like it's like the worst thing you could possibly do. I mean, smoking is about equivalent of having a Confederate flag in your movie nowadays. You know what I mean? Like if you put like a cigarette in a movie, you instantly get like rated R. You can't even have like a PG or a PG-13 anymore if a cigarette in there. But I felt like that seemed kind of like, I mean, at least there is smoking. Like if there was absolutely no smoking and they just replaced it with craft beer like they kind of were doing, I would be like, okay, you kind of pussied out right there. But I felt like they need to be. There's so many scenes like, okay, if Spike has his arms crossed back and he's kicked back on the couch, pop a cigarette in his mouth. You know what I mean? If Faye's kicked back, you know, with her feet up on the table, pop a cigarette in her mouth. You know what I mean? If Jet's cooking, pop a cigarette in his mouth. I mean, it's not that hard.
He just brings out like, hey guys, I got the Bogart special. Just brings out like plates of cigarettes. They just cover it in whiskey and they start just eating it with their fucking hands.
Yeah, it's just like, I just feel like it's one of those ones like, that sounds like such a weird, like, minor one, but like, this sounds like that one where like, you mind us sit down half a star because there wasn't enough cigarettes in the show? I'm like, it's weird, but Cowboy Bebop's very symbolic with like cigarettes, and like, that is almost like, I mean, I know nowadays cigarettes is kind of like the evil, but it's like when we're making movies, it should feel like, you know what it needs to feel like? It needs to feel like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where cigarettes are being smoked like they're going literally out of style.
More smoking, less lesbians, is what you're saying.
Yeah, just like literally get Tarantino in here, because he's the expert of getting characters to have cigarettes in their mouth the whole time.
Well, it's one of those things, like, I noticed that there wasn't as much smoking. I guess that didn't bother me as much, but I noticed that there wasn't as much smoking as there was usually in the show. Mm-hmm. I did notice there was a lot. They were, like, knocking beers back a lot. I guess, like you said, that was kind of their replacement.
Yeah.
Like, is the trio themselves, I think they all bounced well off each other. Just occasionally, maybe Faye would say, like, have a dumb insult, but for the most part, I thought all their back and forth was pretty good.
Yeah.
There were some really cringy lines in passing, and there's sometimes, I think it was maybe intentional, but I got the sense of, and maybe Gotham might be a better example. I don't know. I haven't seen as much as you. Mm-hmm. But I got some kind of like 70s TV show vibes from some of it. And I know the whole like Lost Session thing was meant to be that. But I mean, in the way of like they're like, what was it? Like there's an episode with Whitney, and Whitney is a lady, and instead of a guy, and instead of being a boyfriend, she was pretending to be her mother. And that whole thing, and stole her identity and fucked her over. When they were trying to come up with excuses, like, oh, remember that time when you were a kid, and they have that whole play. Yeah. I felt like I was watching something out of like a 70s sitcom or an 80s sitcom right there.
That was probably my least favorite episode. That lady was really kind of like not that good. She was just really annoying. Like I felt like the one, and it's like I don't know. Because here's the thing, I love that Faye episode in the cartoon show where it goes into her past and she finds the VHS tape and all that stuff. And at least like they did kind of keep some of that stuff in there, and I think that's kind of cool. But that lady that they had in here was just kind of just that was just like the total like filler, obnoxious. And then she had the weird Russian husband thing and so on. And there was just some real bizarre parts where you just almost like you're like. How many hands did this go through to get written? Like, I mean, the only upside is it's like, okay, finally Faye gets her ship, because I was like, where the hell is Faye's ship at this whole time?
Well, they don't even get, like, Jet doesn't have the hammerhead.
Yeah,
he has like one of those weird little three-wheeled motorcycle things. They made it look kind of like the hammerhead. Like, okay, John, your character gets a badass spaceship. Awesome. What about me? Well, lady playing Faye, you're going to get an awesome spaceship, but a little bit later. Well, I got the Bebop. What about the Hammerhead? Hey, we got you a Power Wheels over here.
Yeah, pretty much. Like the adult Power Wheels. And, I mean, I kind of assume that they probably, like, they're going to condense it in a sense. Since Jet has the Bebop, he's not going to have the Hammerhead. I mean, maybe that'll come at some point, but...
I could see it popping in episode 2, but I think you don't need to always have the... How did they get it? Like, they could just have it already. That's kind of my thing.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I feel like this thing does have a lot of things where it feels like they got to kind of like... Because that's the one thing that I feel like a lot of Americans sometimes don't understand from Japanese. Japanese are really good at having stuff happen and almost being explained without having to, like, stop and explain it to you. Where a lot of American shows have to do the thing like, hey, let's stop and sit down and talk for a second and... You know, let's get the filler episode in to tell you this, you know, why it happened, where, like, a Japanese thing wouldn't have to do that.
Well, it's also something to the effect of, like, what was the example I was going to make? Like, There's some things they pick up on, like, for instance, Ein. All we knew about Ein in the original was Ein was just really smart and a data dog. What's a data dog? Well, there's, like, some kind of special code scanned into the dog's DNA that can only be read through some machine, and beyond that, the dog is super smart. Okay, what else? Well, that's it. Yeah. And this, they do utilize the dog, maybe not as much as you think maybe not as, like, I don't know, not as, the dog's almost more there as, like, scenery, just, oh, look, there's the dog. Yeah. And then at one scene, like, I felt so bad for the dog. I knew the dog was coming back, but when the dog uses eyes,
literally turns into like R2D2 for a second.
Yeah, and then they just leave the dog on the, like, dock and fly away. I did feel bad for the dog.
I just felt like those ones, like, the dog turned into a walking projector. Get fucking rid of it. It's like they almost treated the dog like it was, like, possessed by, like, the devil or something like that. Like, almost like one of those ones, if, like, say it was one of those weird things where it, like, went back in time, like almost like Army of Darkness style, and it's like, here's this technology from the future, but, like, in the 1600s they would just look like dark magic. Like, that's how they treated that dog, like, when they saw that it had projector eyes. When it came out, I mean, like, it had probably two messages in there. They could have got the "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi," or they got,
the evil French dude, like, "You will die, boy." Wrong channel. Try HDMI 3.
Yeah, exactly. Flip that switch on the dog's head. But yeah, well, at least, I mean, at the total end, for somehow, some way, Ed seems to find the dog and whatnot. And I'll say this: the Ed character is literally doing the person playing Ed is playing exactly almost how the English dub of Ed is. But that is almost very frightening in live action.
God, I'll say this. I'm trying to be as nice as possible. I appreciate the effort. They went the distance.
Oh yeah,
no shit to that, like, to that actor.
No, but I mean, it was literally the anime come to live action, but it was super uncanny, frightening.
I'll say this: I feel like people may, like, unsubscribe after hearing this. If there's one thing I'm gonna say, tone back on this when making a Cowboy Bebop live action, Ed. Yeah. I'm just saying, just because some things don't work in live action, and of all the things they choose to change, I'm surprised, even though it's only just for, like, a one quick scene that mainly works as a teaser for the next season, if the next season even happens.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you're like, ooh, God, that's rough. That's rough. And I'm not trying to be a dick. That she went all out, like, it felt like a kid, and this is basically what Ed is. A kid saying, "I'm going to do an impersonation of my favorite anime character." Like, oh boy, oh God.
Yeah, that's literally. I mean, as I said, like, it's one of those ones. Like, that girl hits it 100%. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, if that was a talent contest for the best Ed actress, I mean, she definitely got that down perfect. If that was what you were going for. But that's the one thing that I felt could have been kind of toned down. Because here's the thing. Someone who's watching this who's never seen Cowboy Bebop before, and that comes on, that might be the part they go, shit, I'm never watching one of those again.
Well, that's the very reason. I guarantee you that is the very reason they waited until, like, the last scene of the very last episode to drop her in there. And I knew she would be. They hinted at her. Yeah. Earlier on, they just said, "I got a tip from Radical Edward." Radical Edward, really? Yeah. So they hint at her a few times, but then in that scene, I feel like that a lot of people, they don't know how to write Ed, which I understand. If you go exactly like the anime, it would be hard to do it. But I think there are ways to do it. That's a character you would have to change for live action. And I'm surprised some of the things they did change, but didn't change that.
Well, yeah, because that's the perfect one that all you gotta do for Ed, really, is just tone the character down. Same character, just crank it down from 11 back to, like, 2. You know what I mean? And just give her here's the thing. Literally just give Ed the old-fashioned hacker stereotype character. That's all you really need. I mean, you don't need to, get out of the box or anything like that. That's fine. Give it a couple, like, in a sense, like, here's the best way. This is like, you take, like, the guy from Jurassic Park 4, the guy who's really into Jurassic Park, the kind of nerdy guy in the computer lab. Mm-hmm. You give her kind of like one of those, but just like a 12-year-old version of that. Where she really likes things. She's really kind of, like, overly into stuff, but just tone back the wacky. But you know what's going to happen, though? If they would have done that, there would have been just Ed fans that just would have bitched and complained that, like, she wasn't full on Edward.
Cowboy Bebop's one of my favorite shows, and I'm fully aware that whenever I show Cowboy Bebop to somebody who's never seen it before, I gotta make sure, I gotta think to myself, is Ed in this episode? And if I gotta show him the whole series, I'm like, well, at least Ed doesn't come in until episode 6 or 7. And I even think the creators knew that because they waited to put her in until episode 6 or 7.
Well, because that's the one thing about Cowboy Bebop is that the Ed character for the anime series, that's the one thing. It's like, if you can't handle Ed, you might not be able to watch the entire show because that... And, you know, and I mean, and a lot of animes kind of have that. They'll have just that one character that's like, you know, if you just took that one character out, you had a real solid show. That one character is going to throw off some certain people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I get why they held back on her. I'm just surprised that when they put her in, it was just kind of like, it was like someone like, they had the hose going, and they just like kinked up the hose, just let it build up until like the faucet was about to explode. Like, now! And then like, Spike! Like, oh shit! The goggles and everything.
It's like that thing like when you drop the hose, and then you accidentally hit the trigger, and it shoots, and then next thing you know, it's spraying you in the face and everything, and you're having a hard time turning it off. That's how it sort of felt. Like, there's just chaos going, and now you got tangled up in there, and so yeah, like as I said, if this was in the movie theaters, that scene would have been so frightening.
Well, here's another thing about that though. Like the first time I saw that scene, I was kind of like not like flabbergasted and disgust, but just like, holy shit, that's what you're doing? I wasn't even paying attention to what she was saying. Before we did the show, like literally before we recorded, I rewatched the last 2 episodes just to jog my memory. And the whole she is basically, did you catch what she's saying? Did you pick up on all the nonsense she was jabbering?
Well, they're actually like clips from like the anime, like all the certain like things, like they're taking like those kind of like moments. But
no, what she was saying though, what she was saying, did you pick up on what she was telling Spike?
I can't remember exactly.
Vincent is going to be the villain for season 2. Vincent from the movie.
From the movie. Oh, that's kind of cool.
She's saying Villaggio. What? Big bounty Villaggio. Scary butterfly man. Like, I just remember hearing scary butterfly man, and I was like, what the fuck are you talking? Then I remember, oh wait, he saw lights that looked like butterflies.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that's actually pretty cool then. So at least it's like they found kind of that's actually a perfect way to kind of go, to start using some of the the movie stuff mixed with the other stuff they haven't used from the show so far.
Well, when they went to get the French guy, they went to Chirius Medical, and that is the drug company from the movie. So I was like, okay, they're either grabbing the French dude or they're grabbing Vicious, and they first wheel him out because he wasn't in the whole clown outfit yet. Mm-hmm. So I was like, is it Vicious? And they said they call him Mad Pierrot. Like, oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not, but yeah, no, I mean, like, they definitely utilize a lot of Cowboy Bebop stuff. It doesn't have that thing where the show doesn't feel like it's just like a bunch of people kind of got it, kind of took like a look at like, an episode or 2 of Cowboy Bebop and then threw it over their shoulder and said, yeah, I got this. It definitely feels like, the people all involved all dig Cowboy Bebop, even if they have maybe their own ways to sort of like try to rework it in a sense. But, it's like, and like the action, when there is action, the action's really good in this.
Yeah, well, the thing is, they actually do have, like, the action choreography and the fights are great. Especially the fight between Spike and Vicious at the end in the church. Like, that fight scene is great.
Yeah, it's really cool.
But they do, because you could tell, like, I'm wondering how much of this is a studio leaning in. Like, I feel like there's 3 or 4 factors. Some of it is a studio leaning in, like, I don't get this shit. Yeah. Another part of it is budget and trying to work around the budget, and like, well, we got to make use of this bar, we got to make use of this set, so we got to make a lot of plot points around this area. And then you also have like people who really do like the show but are trying to write it and trying to like put in as many references and Easter eggs to the show as possible while still trying to give you something different enough, because there is this weird balancing act. Because I'm gonna make a weird comparison here for a second. Now, we tried this once, didn't work out. I'm not saying another one needs to happen, but let's just say you wanted to make another live action Dragon Ball movie, entirely different cast, or even a live action Dragon Ball TV show or something, just hypothetically. I'm not saying it needs to be made. I'm not saying it should be made. Not saying it has to happen. But there's so much Dragon Ball out there. I feel like you could mix and match it.
Yeah.
You could present things out of order. You could bring Krillin in sooner instead of fighting Emperor Pilaf. Maybe they fight the Red Ribbon Army first and mix it around. And maybe once you get to Frieza, it's not just Frieza. Also, Cooler is there. Maybe Broly can get involved somehow. I don't know. I'm saying there's enough things. There's so much history to that. You can mix it around and change it. Or, even like Batman. There's so many iterations of Batman. You can Frankenstein something. There's only so much Cowboy Bebop. So to go against that grain, to change it so much, would seem like, well, are we watching Cowboy Bebop anymore? So that's the hard balancing act of trying to present something new, worthwhile watching, at the same time presenting it as still Bebop.
Yeah, because, it's almost like one of those ones, like, I mean, I like almost that it doesn't have to be, like, 100% just, like, the animation turned live action, because it's almost like one of those ones, like, live action generally can't outbeat, like, a good animation. You know what I mean? Like, I know there's many other people out there would say it the exact opposite, but I feel like it's really hard to top a good animation. Live action just doesn't cut it. So sometimes you got to kind of do things a little bit differently. But in this one, I think it does have that balancing act of trying to keep, like, all, like, the integrity of, like, the classic Cowboy Bebop, but then trying to throw in, like, what it feels like it does have? It does kind of have, like, the almost, like, the stereotypical, like, television kind of style of the nowadays kind of style, where I feel like, in a sense, it kind of almost takes from, like, soap operas, but I always kind of feel like it's like the backstabby kind of, like, TV, where, because that's almost how it feels, like Julia and Vicious, and everybody's kind of having, like, that kind of, like backstabbing, trying to take over, kind of
Game of Thrones thing.
Yeah, and Game of Thrones is the thing that kind of definitely popularized it, but, like, when I kind of think about it, I'm like, where that really all came from was soap operas, because that's totally, like, what those are. And I know people love the living daylights out of that. That's sometimes, I'm not really the biggest fan of that kind of stuff. I mean, like, it's not the worst, but I could kind of do with less of that. And, I mean, in this one, it's not so bad. It's there enough that's kind of like, okay, whatever. I mean, I get it. That's what the kids are into nowadays. But, well,
there's even, like, oh, go ahead, yeah.
Oh, no, you can go on.
Well, the whole thing with it is, really, if you just break it down to Spike, Faye, and Jet, it ultimately comes down to what the show mostly is, which is bounty to bounty, episode to episode, just trying to make money, trying to get some food, this and that. And then we cut over to meanwhile at Vicious's penthouse, and then we see, like, the whole Julia Vicious dynamic, and that's where we get the whole, like, that whole thing. We get the whole quasi Game of Thrones. And I know there's always been, like you said, the whole backstabby, I'm in control now thing, but Game of Thrones seemed to really popularize it. Yeah, that's where we kind of get that. And that's maybe like 25% of an episode until you get to maybe like the last 2 or 3 episodes. So, but at the same time, it still kind of hangs over Spike because he knows the syndicate is kind of after him. So aside from doing whatever bounty, Spike has to often kind of like stay a step ahead of Jet, because, like, well, I can't let Jet know that I was a syndicate member at some point or whatever, which we've been talking about the show this whole time. We've barely tapped on John Cho as Spike.
No, and he is really good as it. I mean, like, granted, like, that's the one that, like, the second that I heard he was Spike, you didn't have to even show me a picture. I'm like, oh, I'm sold on that. I think some people go, you mean Harold is? And it's like, I'm like, dude, he's like a super actor. He's played in all kinds of other stuff. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I love Harold and Kumar. That's like one of the best comedies ever made. And I mean, granted, whenever I think of John Cho, I mostly always even think of him first and foremost from
the MILF guy.
Yeah, from American Pie, because that was just where I was. I'm like, I've always liked him, and, like, it's one of those ones, like, when he was there, I'm like, oh, dude, he's got it. Like, you don't even have to say anymore. And I feel in this one, he does. He's got the right look. They found the way to kind of get Spike's hair kind of working in live action, because that always seems like one of those tough ones. It's like, how do you have the right kind of looking hair that's not going to look like he's just got a goofy, like, wig on or something like that?
Yeah.
He's not, in a sense, because Spike's hair works really well, where Vicious's hair just looks like he's got a goofy wig on.
He's just like wearing a mop.
Yeah, it's like one of those ones. It's like I just feel like I don't know, like the guy who plays Vicious. There's nothing wrong with him. It's just he just does not look good with like that super like bleach blonde hair. Like I don't know. There's like there just feels like couldn't you find somebody? Couldn't you just find like some like I don't know like there's got to be just some like rock star guy out there, something like that that's just already got the right like blonde hair. Not this guy who's just feels like so awkward with it on.
Yeah, you probably could have found something like that, like a Japanese K-pop star or some shit.
If it was in
I don't know.
the 80s, you would have just found just some like hair metal person to like show up and play Vicious, like because that's.
I just realized I said Japanese K-pop. I meant J-pop star. Shit.
Yeah, just one of them. Let's see, like one of those guys who goes over there. He's like, well, you know what, I might not be a J-pop star here, but I can go over to Korea and change the game a bit. I mean, come on, like they're not gonna know if I just change my name a little bit. Come on, no one's gonna know, right?
Especially Americans.
Definitely Americans. Literally, I could just slap myself on the cover of People magazine and just say I'm from I could say I'm from the fucking moon and they'd believe it.
No, I honestly, the guy who played Vicious, because the whole let's actually go onto Spike for a second. Because John Cho is Spike. I mean, I was immediately, like, when I first heard that, I'm like, he's not the first person that comes to mind, but I can definitely see him playing Spike. And I guess the whole thing with Spike is he's 27, but you got John Cho, who's almost 50, playing him. Like, I think he's 49 or 50, but at the same time, he doesn't fucking look it. He looks like he's in his late 30s or early 40s. He aged very fucking gracefully.
Well, and I'll say this. I know that the Cowboy Bebop ages, they always say Spike's 27 and Jet's 35 and Faye's, like 25, but realistically 77. I will say, like, Spike almost still feels kind of older. Like, and Jet does not feel 35. When I think of Jet, I feel Jet should be 55. I think that's always a Japanese thing. I think there's something about Japan. They love, like, youth or something like that. Like, where they should, like, have some of their characters just be like, no, you drew this character looking like they're, like, 10, 20 years older than, like, what you say they are in the booklet.
I remember at one point in time, it was so fucking stupid. You know that thing when you're in your 20s and you're thinking, man, I haven't got as much done in my life with X, Y, and Z. I remember like being like 20. It got progressively more realistic as it went on, but it started off like I was reading all fucking things. Like, why are you bringing this up? I was reading a Superman book, and it was a Superman origin story, and I was like, man, Clark Kent already had a job at the Daily Planet by 24. I'm 25. What the fuck is wrong with me? He's a Superman. He's in a fucking comic book. What am I thinking? I had to, like, check myself with that. And then, like, a few years later, I was like, man, Spike was a self-made hitman at like 27. I'm like 27. I'm still working at a bike rental company. So, I'm 1 year away from being. I'm almost 35, which trips me out. I'm like, man, I don't have my own spaceship, running my own like bounty hunting business, commanding 2 other people on what to do.
Adult Swim lied to me. Well, this is the weirder one though. Is I remember when I was watching, I think Simpsons, and when they one of the episodes they say what Homer's age is, and he's only like 36, and that was like, what the fuck?
I guess in 36 in the 90s or something, but I guess if it stays that way.
Well, yeah, and I guess it's just in your head you picture Homer being like 46 maybe. Like that's what I would almost think, but. I guess you could be 36 and be the balding, fat goof guy walking around, and so I don't know. It's just one of those ones like I mean, I guess it makes sense, but it's one of those ones like, wait a second, I'm almost Homer Simpson age now.
Well, I guess they got married young and they had kids immediately or something like that.
Yeah.
But they have like a few flashback episodes. They change it. They made it the 90s instead of the 70s or something.
Well, nowadays they probably have one that they're probably technically like younger than us now.
Marge and Homer like met at a like Pearl Jam concert or something like that. It's probably the new thing. But no, what I was gonna say. John Cho though, he nails it, both the physicality and the characteristics. There's even have some fun like back and forth. Like there's the part like even though the episode wasn't the best episode, there's still some funny bits with Spike and like Jet where like they're in the back of like a bus and they're kind of like bickering at each other, and like Spike is wearing the ring just as the tracker. It's like, you guys are a lovely couple, and like he like just to fuck with Jet, like Spike's like, he lucked out, then he just waves the wedding ring, says, you're a beautiful couple, thanks you ma'am, we know. He's like, I don't believe this shit.
Yeah, no.
Go ahead.
Oh, as I say, no. It does have some good back and forth bickering and so on like that, and kind of like like those three characters, like that's the thing I feel like is kind of the most golden thing. As long as you combine that with good action set pieces and so on, I feel like that kind of magic is there, and. Yeah, that's the thing. The characters are super solid, all in all. It's some of the little odd stuff along the way. I will say one thing that actually is really impressive that they got down like 100% perfect is the when they watch the TV show and it's the
Big Shot.
Yeah, Big Shot. Like when I saw them, like, oh my god, those characters look identical. Which I'm kind of surprised because I didn't think this day and age they would have like, are they gonna have the girl that has just a jacket on but no shirt underneath? And it's like, oh, she is dressed like that.
They look like full on cosplayers for it.
Yeah, I mean that's what I mean. It's like because most things never do that. Where it's like it's just like if you just do the cosplay look. There's people out there that get these costumes like down 100%. Like I don't know why sometimes movies always feel like they got to make the half-ass looking version of it, but it's like that one's like, dude, they got that down really good. Now I will say that's another scene though that like for somebody who's never seen the anime, I bet you that part seems really bizarre to them.
Well, the show does have a good balance of like they get a lot of stuff in there. I know we talked about the few things they gender bend and tweaked around, but there's like, the Teddy Bomber episode I thought was really good. They got a lot. They basically took the opening to the movie for the first episode and then switched a few things around and then brought in the whole bloody eye thing and then still twisted that around as well. So they do get a lot of characters in there. I think that they do a good job, because sometimes I'm wondering how are they going to get this in there. It's going to feel a little out of left field, but then they do a good job of connecting characters. Like, okay, often it's Vicious grabbing somebody and deciding he's going to use this guy against Spike or something, and that still works in the context of the show. I will say that, like, there's some characters they changed that didn't bother me. Like, I didn't mind that they changed Gren so much. Like, Gren, I know he's drastically different in this. He's not like a war veteran, but like I thought that like I guess they just wanted to like use that character more, and I thought he was a great character in the show. He's drastically different in this, but I still think it works.
Yeah. I mean, they still do a good way of kind of combining things, yet still making certain things a little bit kind of fresh and different, and but still capturing like the exact way it kind of is. Yeah, I mean, overall, it does a pretty good job at getting things down, even, with it's kind of like, I mean, it feels like it just has the typical, like, TV tropes, I think, is what kind of holds it back. And I know that certain people love that kind of stuff. I know for me, that's always the thing that keeps me away from TV, is generally, like, the long filler scenes, And, I do feel that there is some parts that could be trimmed down, but I feel like it's one of those ones, it's hard for someone to go, like, if you only release 6 episodes instead and you had it just kind of nicely, cut down, I felt like you feel like, what, you can't release more episodes? I think that's just how they sort of feel.
I honestly feel like this could have been 7 or 8 episodes. I'm thinking maybe 10 episodes.
Yeah, I feel like there's a little bit... I mean, I'll say this, in about, other than the first couple of episodes, most of the episodes could have had at least about 10 minutes kind of cut down, I think,
Well, it's also something else about this. I'm kind of wondering what they're going to use, because they used up a lot of their... I mean, now, granted, they're probably going to have some kind of weird power struggle dynamic of some sort, and the first episode, or first 2 episodes of the next season, when next season comes out, is supposed to be the team getting back together, because we have... What characters do we already use up? We already used up... Mad Puro. We used up the Red Eye guy. We used up Teddy Bomber and Abdul Hakim. So I guess notable villains you could still have for the next one. They already announced basically it's going to be Vincent. Then you have like the 2 blaxploitation bounty hunters from the Mushroom Samba episode, and then the Mushroom Dealer, and then you also have like...
You got like the Heavy Metal Queen, like Space Trucker Lady.
Yeah, Heavy Metal Queen. Yeah, I guess I was thinking villains, but I guess characters that could still help move the plot one way or the other. Like like VT or whatever her name is. Like Cowboy Andy, but I'm not sure. Did they kill Cowboy Andy? Because they had a leaderboard, and they had like Cowboy Andy was on there, and I saw them take a name off. I didn't see if it was Cowboy Andy or not, but and then there's Chessmaster Hex, and then the bounty hunter going after Chessmaster Hex.
Yeah. Well, and then...
so you have like eight characters right there that could still, bump shoulders with.
Well, that's, I mean, is I think there's just enough material left that you could pretty much do another 10 episodes of, and hopefully call it good there. Because I feel like, and just do it like short and sweet, just like kind of the anime. Because if you go on any longer, I mean, then you're gonna have to start making stuff up. And not saying that you can't do that, but it's gonna feel, I don't know, a little blasphemous to kind of keep going on making up stuff that's when it's not coming from the original creator.
Yeah, by that point, I think it will be, especially with like, I mean. Well, however, season 2 is probably going to end. I mean, it's probably going to be like Vicious taking the seat back, killing Julia. And I'm going to say the whole thing with Julia at the end was like very sudden. Like the whole thing, because like, the thing about Julia is she was like a femme fatale, but the thing with her is she already lived a full life, and she had like a busy, hard life at a young age. And she just seemed very stoic and very mysterious. Where this, she is kind of like the weeping housewife who's trying to escape her abusive husband, and then at the very end, she becomes the villain. Mm-hmm. And it's like, like becoming the villain is one thing, but after seeing Spike after all this time and then shooting him the second he says no to you, that seems like beyond being the villain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't super impressed with the Julia character in this version. I felt like,
yeah.
You know, once again, that felt like that was trying to be very soap opera-y. That was totally what that was going with. And I feel the only thing that I kind of don't really like is I could see in the next series is this going to be, now you're going to have that super, like, power struggle between Julia, Vincent, Vicious, you know, Spike, whatever you want to say it, and it's going to have one of those kind of things, which, yeah, I don't know. It's like one of those ones, it's like I see what they're doing, you know, and I know that that's popular, so that, like, and that always kind of reminds me, like, is that what the creators totally want, or is that kind of thing that Netflix kind of leans in and kind of does that thing? Like, sometimes you kind of feel like there's just that, like, hey, we have this list of things you got to get in here. People like the backstabbing kind of like soap opera style. Put that in there. Don't put very many cigarettes in there because cigarettes are bad, you know. But, you know, shooting people is okay.
There's also, well, if I can make a prediction,
you know, somebody's got to be a lesbian in there out of the main characters. like somebody has to be out of the main characters.
If I can make a prediction for the next season, I could, if there is one. Mm-hmm. Because this thing, I'm not sure what they're going to do about it, because it's getting ripped apart by critics. But I think it's, if this did not have, like, if it wasn't like such a appreciated, beloved series,
yeah,
I think that it would be, here's this new show. It's kind of weird and quirky, but it's like, there's some weird things in it, but it's actually pretty cool. I think that's the way most people would walk away from this if there wasn't like the show already. And I feel like it goes out of its way to be a little wackier than what the actual anime is. I think the anime is more stoic and this goes out of its way to be, well, it's kind of like an anime, right? And I feel like some writers or directors are like, well, we don't really want it to be stoic or wacky. And then some producers like, but it's an anime, right? Like, all right, okay, sure.
Well, yeah, because I will say that is the one thing that's kind of weird, because it's like the show should be a little bit more serious than it is. It's a little bit kind of like, not necessarily like slapsticky, but like they definitely put more jokes in it than are kind of necessary. And I'm not saying that, like, you know, some of the jokes are great and so on like that, but it is that weird thing that you'll have like almost like one of the most serious, most like almost like, in a sense, like art piece animes, like in a sense, you know, beyond the Ed character, it's like you almost, it's like you can almost show this to like anybody who's like hardcore into film or anything like this, and it's like if you couldn't get this and like how, you know, well done, you know, the Cowboy Bebop anime is, like there's almost something kind of wrong with you in a sense. But it is that thing that like it almost feels like they double down the whack and say, once again, it has that weird like Batman, like not as much as Batman Ninja, but like that thing where it's like, okay, animes are kind of weird and wacky, right? Well, like Go a little bit more hardcore. And it's like, well, no, only animes are like literally every genre. They can be anything. Like I think some people just don't get that.
Yeah, and another example I was going to make, I feel like, what was the example I was going to make? I feel like, for instance, well, actually, no, some of the humor that does work is like, there's the part when they're the Teddy Bomber, they're trying to track him down, they open up and they're at a wedding, and like, Spike's like, we don't blend in, like, and Jet's like, I'm the master at blending in. And it shows him, he's like the only one, like, in a brown suit and a fedora, everyone's in white suits around him. So, like, there's, like, some of those, like, I think a lot of, like, majority of the humor centering around Jet is, like, perfect, just about. If there's one thing I'm going to say, I mean, I think the whole trio does a great job, but
Yeah.
I think Mustafa Shakir was like perfect casting as Jet. There is no moment where I was questioning, would Jet do that? Like if Jet had a daughter, he would definitely do that. But
Yeah.
it was one of those things like that character, he just sold me as that character. Even down to his voice performance, you could tell he watched the dub. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. No. I definitely think that Jet was extremely dialed in the whole way through. And yeah, I mean, like that's the thing is so many of these things like that work really well and are good. But it is that kind of thing because, you know, like the main thing about Cowboy Bebop when you're watching the anime is so many of the episodes end with like a bittersweet kind of feel. Like that's almost like one of the core things of it. The show doesn't really have a whole lot of that in there, like the live action one, because it doesn't have as much of that kind of like, it has it a bit, but not enough to like resonate as much. And I'm not saying that like, you know, it's not still enjoyable and things like that, but it's missing. I think that's the thing is it is missing a little bit of that like seriousness, bittersweet, a little bit of that kind of dark-edged kind of like thing, you know. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's also because it's like the show's episodic and not continual, where this thing's doing the continue thing. It's more focusing on like the cliffhanger moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's the Netflix thing. It always wants you to watch the next episode, so they're going to always kind of end somewhat on a cliffhanger. So you have like a character get blasted away, and then tune in now for the next episode, and then I feel like that's something about it because they all felt a little bit more like here's their own standalone story throughout the show. Now I am glad they threw the original anime on Netflix for people to check that out too. That made me happy. So people could see what made the original one so great. And this is once again, it doesn't sound like we liked it. I can't speak for you, but I myself liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it, and I will watch the second season. But going back, I was going to say before I put myself on an own tangent, I got a theory that what's going to happen in season 2 is that Vincent is going to come into play. And then he is going to be trying to either take power from Julia at the Syndicate or take over, or like make a deal with her. And Spike is coming in like, look, I'm tracking that guy down, so I don't want you getting hurt. I don't want you getting involved. And then things just escalate. Now, one thing that might come out of that will be interesting is, and who knows how they're going to portray him, but like Vicious versus Vincent. That could be an interesting fight because we never got a chance to see that.
No, I do think that would be actually kind of cool. And I think that, like, hopefully when it kind of comes next, and in a sense, I think, you know, sometimes you need that first season to kind of work out all the kinks and so on like that. Like, a lot of times, I'll use this example. It's like Gotham. Gotham's first season's very rocky. But, like, once they get past that show turns into, like, one of the most solid shows I've ever kind of seen, where, like, every episode you're guaranteed to get good action. Everything feels like it has a purpose. There's no filler in there and so on like that. But it had to take that first moment to kind of figure it out. It's like it almost didn't know what it was doing exactly at first. And then once it kind of did, it kind of is. So I feel the second one might be able to get that just dialed in just that extra bit, you know? Because they'll see what works, what didn't work as much, tone certain things down, and what have you. Maybe even make it, I don't know, hopefully this is like one, because mostly it's always the other way around and stuff, where it's like, hey, people like the comedy, amp the comedy up even more. Maybe this is one of the few ones that be like, you know what, maybe we'll make it this one a little bit more on the bittersweet, a little bit more serious, you know, kind of go with that. And no, I think it can kind of work out.
I hope they make a second season. I'm not sure if it will. I think it's doing good in streaming numbers, but I don't know with the reviews it's getting, which I think a lot of the reviews are just being like too kind of like been out of shape about it. Like if you said you love the anime but didn't care for this version, I'd get it. But if you said that like you thought this was like straight ass, the worst anime adaptation ever made, I'm like, you haven't seen Dragon Ball Evolution.
Well, yeah, anybody who says that kind of stuff obviously hasn't watched very much. I don't trust anybody's opinion when they say it's the worst, because I hate the term when people use the term the worst. I don't know what it is. Like, that's one of those things that's always bothers me. If I see any video that uses the term worst in there, I just say, get this out of here. Because somebody obviously, if you're saying this thing's the worst, you obviously have not watched enough stuff. You know what I mean? There's always going to be something worse, and there's always going to be something down there. And if you're focusing on the negativity of stuff, it's just silly, you know. But no, I mean, overall, it's pretty darn solid for the most part. I mean, I'm saying this, I'm not a big TV person, so a lot of times the stuff that I don't like in TV stuff, I know everybody else kind of likes. It's like that thing that, for me, I just get kind of bored when there's like sort of filler stuff, or if there's just like way long talking scenes that you can just sort of tell that they're only long because they need to fill up a time frame. It's not that you necessarily need all this information, but overall, I still thought, like, the action's still pretty good. The set pieces look good. Like, the CG work actually looks really good in it. When there's action, the action's really good and so on. And, other than, like, some minor little, like, stuff, because that's really what I feel. It's like the only things I don't really care for, they're all kind of minor. It sounds like it's a lot, but it's more like, I wish there was some cigarettes. I wish, there's a couple things like that, But, overall, I think it is still a pretty interesting one, and I'm pretty sure they would make a second one, like, because this day and age, movie-wise, if something doesn't do good, then they instantly cut the cord on that. But it feels TV is a little bit different.
I'm just wondering, just because I remember they had like this hour-long, maybe it was only 30 minutes, but this whole like, we're going to premiere the official trailer for Netflix's Cowboy Bebop, and we're going to have like interview the stars leading up to it and this and that, all this shit. I'm like, okay, I'll be back for this when the trailer comes on. Boom. And then like came in like, looks like the trailer is starting now. Okay, cool. And then watched the trailer for it. And then I was like, okay, so you guys are really giving this thing, you're really hyping this thing up. We're trying to make this big deal out of it. Yeah, that little Lost Sessions like mini movie on YouTube that you threw out there. Mm-hmm. And then like the day one this thing came out, after a bunch of the reviews already came out, it was not the first thing to pop up, like, and they do whenever there's a new thing that comes out its first day. It was like 4 down,
Yeah, I kind of noticed that too. There was like a couple movies that kind of outbeat it, but yeah. I mean, for as much as I guess they are, but they're, who knows how much stuff Netflix released that same day and so on. I will say, actually, something that is kind of cool in it, too, is, like, their intro title sequence where they just kind of do, in a sense, that literally the same thing as the anime, but they just do it in, like, live action, is actually pretty neat looking.
Yeah, that was cool, yeah. I liked it. I hope they make another season, and I hope they take some of the criticisms people talked about into mind when making it, like the decent criticisms, not the distinction not ever made again, not that shit.
Don't take the angry 15-year-old criticisms, just like the angry 15-year-old who gets the writer job always. Yeah, you know what I mean? I don't know. That guy sure seems to get a lot of like words out, and everybody seems to listen to him, but...
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I think and it doesn't need much. I feel like it just needs a little bit of fine tuning, and I think it could actually be pretty darn dialed in.
Yeah. Anyway, well, I guess that's a good place to leave off at right there. But yeah, if you like Cowboy Bebop, I'm going to say check the show out, but don't go in with the highest of expectations. Not saying go in with low expectations, but don't go in with expectations like it's the sequel to the show or something.
Yeah, you just go into it with an open mind, and as long as you kind of go that way, I think that's it. You can't go into it thinking, yeah, it's going to be like the next run of the show, or, it's not going to be something like, in a sense, like Evangelion 4 that we just kind of watched, where it's like, in a sense, this thing came out way past the other thing, but it actually fits in real nice and well. It's just to take it as its own thing and so on. And if I kind of compare it to, like, because, there's only a handful really of anime live actions out there really at the end of the day. I mean, if you go to Japan, there's a lot more, but in America there's only a good handful of them out there, and I think this one sits up pretty high if you kind of compare it to some of the other things. So yeah, definitely check it out.
It's not this is an American one, but the Kenshin live action movies exist. That exists, so that exists. So this is already not going to be like the best one, and that's something that can be transferred easily to live action, I believe. But yeah, I won't hold us up any longer.
Well, I was gonna say, the Rurouni Kenshin, those ones. If you want a really amazing live action anime, those 3 Rurouni Kenshin movies are really good.
Did you see 4 and 5?
No, I didn't see 4 and 5 yet.
They're on Netflix. 4 is the prequel, basically the remake of Samurai X, and that one's just kind of whatever, just the remake of Samurai X. But the 5th one is awesome.
Oh, cool. Well, I need to check those ones out too. I think they're also on Funimation. But, which always feels weird watching. Like, I'm on Funimation. I'm watching live action.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Like, there's just like there's not very many live action movies on Funimation. But there's like 15 of them, and it just feels really bizarre. But yeah. So you know what? personally, I don't mind seeing like some more kind of live action anime stuff. I mean, you know, it is always kind of hard to hold a candle to like the original versions, but you know, I mean, I think once we get past, like, you know, once people drain the well, I guess, of comic books, of course, this is what's going to be the next big one they're going to go for. So prepare yourself. And I think if you just go in, you'll be ready for it. But till then, go check out oldmanorange.com for more podcasts, comic books like Pizza Boys, old animations, and all that fun stuff. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Ryan Dunnigan.
And we'll see you some other time.
Later, folks.